All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Today's episode is giving a big shout out to Mark Johnson, who suggested the topic of Jonbenet Ramsey and her murder now more than 20 years ago. And also, if anybody has any sort of suggestions for things that they would like to hear about, or just some things that they would like to hear, a different person's voice on, you can drop a suggestion in the comments section below, and no matter what you put out, we will discuss it here on this channel. And it doesn't always have to be a true crime case. If you want to talk about something that is, like things like, the paranormal, maybe something historical, or just political things, absolutely anything. If you have a suggestion for something, we will cover it, no matter what it is. This is one of the few corners of YouTube where no topic is off limits. So let's get into this, and it was a good suggestion, and my immediate response was, yes, I'll cover the Jonbenet Ramsey case, but I have to confess that I really looked into this case a couple of years ago, and that was when I was really, kind of doing the deep dive stuff on Jonbenet Ramsey. So I'm a little bit rusty on it, so I had to get out and get some things for a little bit of a refresher. And right now I'm holding my copy of Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, the book by Lawrence Schiller. And I bought this book about 20 years ago, and it was well above my reading level at the time. I was just a kid, I saw the commercials for the miniseries on CBS, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, and I bought this book at a Walmart. Actually, it is dense, I will tell you. 800 pages plus, 814 pages if you count the appendix. But where are we starting with this one? Well, there are 3 questions on the back here that I would like to read out. Question 1. Why were the Ramseys, who were the targets of the investigation, able to control the direction of police inquiry? Question 2. Can the key to the murder be found in the pen and writing pad used for the ransom note? Question 3. Was it possible for Jonbenet to have been killed by an intruder? I jumbled my words on that. The way he wrote it was it possible for an intruder to have killed Jonbenet? Okay, let's look at question number 2 as well. And like all uploads on this channel, this is more geared toward people who are somewhat familiar with the case, so we can discuss some theoretical stuff. Question 2. Can the key to the murder be found in the pen and writing pad used for the ransom note? Well, this is one of the absolute largest things that has stood out to everybody. All of the materials that were used were found in the Ramseys' house. And that is quite peculiar, is it not? I mean, it's like, even the things like they're using the Sharpie pen or the Sharpie marker from, a jar that was placed, on the Ramseys' kitchen table, and they use paper that was from the Ramseys' writing pad. Even the paintbrush that was used to form into a grot for Jonbenet that, that she had been choked and strangled with, that was also belonging to Patsy Ramsey. So it's just that is an enormous peculiarity. And that's one of the biggest things what people have really been zoning in on. They're like, why would an intruder come into the house, but be just grabbing things around so quickly? That's pretty instinctive. Bear in mind, though, it's not unheard of. I was just covering the case of Billy Joe Jenkins on this channel, and they talked about the M25 rapist who, well, he always did that. He would always just, look for things around the whatever environment he was in. He would never bring anything with him. He would just always use a weapon, the first thing he could find. But this case, it's not only the weapon. Like we mentioned, the paintbrush was formed into the grot that choked Jonbenet, but also this one actually involves the writing pad and the pens that were used, and those definitely belong to the Ramseys. It is definitely peculiar, but one of the big things that they're saying about the writing pad, we have the ransom note. The person who wrote it asked for $118,000. That was equivalent to John Ramsey's bonus. So the person who wrote the note had to have had a certain degree of familiarity with the Ramsey family. And, that has opened up another giant can of worms. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that this is just, some Joe Schmo off the street. This is someone who did have insider information, and there had to have been a definitive connection between whoever wrote that note and the Ramsey family. One of the reasons why people think that this note was authored by Patsy Ramsey was not only were these materials found in the house, but these materials, it's the handwriting. And I'm not going to lie to you, there are some definitive similarities between Patsy Ramsey's handwriting and the handwriting that was found in the ransom note. But one of the big things, though, about this is people just will not let it go. It was on national television. I believe it was on Larry King Live when John and Patsy were promoting their book, The Death of Innocence, that, one of the investigators said flat out, "I think you wrote the ransom note." And you know what? It's very similar, but I'm not a handwriting expert, and I'm the first to admit it. But one of the big things that people really point out when it comes to this stuff is they'll say something. Look, these two handwriting samples are identical. And even someone who's not an expert like me can zone in for a second and just be like, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I can see similarities, but identical? I'm not convinced. And we saw this very clearly when I talked about the Zodiac Killer, especially the case of Earl Van Best. It's like when they say, hey, look at these two samples. They are exactly the same. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And one of the big reasons about this is when I first saw Patsy Ramsey's handwriting ever for the first time and saw it compared, to the person who wrote the ransom note, I was just like, I used to write like that when I was younger. I mean, the shapes of the S's and stuff like that, and I used to do stuff like that, but I don't do it all the time. It's just like, I noticed similarities with my own handwriting, so I definitely was not convinced. But that's Lawrence Schiller's second question here. Question 3, though, was it possible for an intruder to kill Jonbenet? They did a special on, I believe it was 2020. It was definitely on ABC because it was hosted by David Muir about, Jonbenet Ramsey for the 20th anniversary. And not once did they mention Michael Helgoth. And I was just, blown away. And I was like, we were watching this as a family because, for some reason my family likes to watch that stuff. Or maybe I just turned it on because I wanted to see it and I insisted, hey guys, check this out or something like that. I forget. But the whole family was watching this episode and my stepmother was like, I think the mother did it. I think she murdered Jonbenet. And I was just like, they didn't once mention Michael Helgoth. They're still going, for only part of the story. Very kind of shoddy workmanship on the part of ABC News. And it's like, who was Michael Helgoth? Well, he is someone who definitely had a working connection with John Ramsey. His family owned a junkyard that was outside of town. He was 26 at the time of Jonbenet's murder. And one of the big things about this is they had some sort of property dispute. And even with going over the information, I'm not completely certain about all the details of the dispute, but he had done some work with the Ramseys in the past, and I'm going to say that one of the largest media outlets that talked about this was Aphrodite Jones, and they put forth one of the absolute most convincing statements regarding, Michael Helgoth's involvement in this case. Okay, so we've talked a little about who he was. His family owned a junkyard. He had a property dispute with the Ramseys, so he definitely had a personal connection. But there was a boot print that was found at the scene that was very unique. And this boot print did not belong to John Ramsey or someone because it had the uniqueness of having the words high-tech stamped into it. H-I-T-E-C, like high-tech, like the boot brand name. Or, it's found on the bottom sole of the boot. And they were able to match that print to Michael Helgoth's. The person we mentioned who had the connection to the junkyard on the outskirts of town. 2 months after Jonbenet's death, Michael Helgoth committed suicide. Allegedly. There's a theory out there that he was indeed murdered. And That's just it. That's its own mystery in itself. Was it a suicide or was it a murder? But one of the things about this particular case is, it's just like, a lot of people are saying that it was Michael Helgoth, but one of the biggest theories is that it was an associate of Michael Helgoth. Because question 3 on this is, was it possible for an intruder to kill Jonbenet? It really should be intruders. Because the Michael Helgoth theory involves at least 2 people. One of them, we know Michael Helgoth because he's deceased now. But there's also an unnamed individual who, as far as I know, on this September 19th, 2018, has not been identified. And if anybody does have that, I would love to hear it. That tells me, though, this boot print that they found, with the letters HITEC, I definitely think that it's possible that, this theory is very valid, that, Jonbenet could have been killed by an associate of Michael Helgoth. It's like, one of the big reasons, though, in something like that, why write a ransom note and, then, murder Jonbenet? Wouldn't you want to keep her alive? Well, it's possible that, there are so many things that just go into the actual death of Jonbenet, whether it's the grot or getting struck on the head that caused that 8.5-inch crack in her skull. It's like, I really do think, though, let's talk about that for a second, because I put forth a very big possibility that this was an intruder, the intruder. But one of the biggest theories, though, is, was this committed by the brother, Burke? Well, Burke went on television a lot for the 20th anniversary as well, and of course, sadly, he was interviewed by Dr. Phil, which I wish he hadn't been. I wish it had been someone, different, but the biggest thing about that is they sort of think that Burke and Jonbenet were eating pineapple, and Jonbenet tried to steal Burke's pineapple, and Burke got mad and picked up an object, most likely a flashlight, and struck her in the head. Is it possible, though, for someone, I believe Burke was 9 at the time, for this 9-year-old to have caused that 8.5-inch crack in her skull by striking her one time? Because, as far as I know, that kind of is the theory that people are put forth when they're trying to implicate Burke Ramsey as the murderer. I think it's very unlikely. Jonbenet took a piece of Burke's pineapple, so he hit her once in the head with a flashlight, causing that 8.5-inch crack in the skull, and then the parents staged the scene. I think it would answer a lot of questions, except for the fact of how unlikely that it is. But, the whole notion of Patsy Ramsey being involved is just that they think that Jonbenet had some sort of temper tantrum, and then she was the one who struck her. And then, that would cause the crack in her skull, and then they had to stage the scene. That sort of is the largest scene, and once again, that explains an enormous amount of things, but where do you get the high-tech boot print from? Where does that come in? So, this is going to turn into a large series of uploads, but this is just kind of my intro to sort of some theories and possibilities about Jonbenet Ramsey. And I'm going to tell you flat out, I'm leaning toward the intruder theory because, well, it's just like they really do believe that Michael Helgoth, this person who was a former associate of John Ramsey, was in the house at that time. And, we have his death 2 months after the death of Jonbenet. So, this is just going to require some more discussion, and hopefully we can stay tuned, and we'll try to find some more things that are going on with Jonbenet. If anyone has anything to comment on, contribute, say anything you would like to say at all about this case, please drop a comment below. And let's talk again soon.